the NEC proscribed 3 groups. They banned 3 groups from the Labour Party, and anyone who is a member of one of those groups will be expelled. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to hear from people from those 3 groups to find out how appalling they are, and why they should be, why they should not be banned. And the first of the people I've invited on is from the Alliance for Workers' Liberty, Pete Radcliff, who I've met in Nottingham at a great fundraiser. It's good to see you, Pete. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me, Crispin.
Now,
I think the last time we met, you gave me a bottle of wine. I won a prize off you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you were great, and a big member of the Labour Party in Nottingham, and I think you had been suspended before at that time as well. What I don't really know much about the Alliance for Workers' Liberty. I read the statement that was put out about how they must appeal this prescription. Can you tell us a bit about the background to the group, and also what you think this says about the Labour Party that you've been banned?
Yeah, well, the Alliance for Workers' Liberty, the group which I've been in for most of my political life, and its predecessors, there was a group called Socialist Organiser in the 80s and 90s. We've always been Labour Party supporters. We've always fought for Labour governments. I myself joined at the age of 16. I left in year 2000, after Blair took power, to stand in a protest as a protest candidate in the Socialist Alliance when we were trying to embarrass the Labour Party and try and get the left fighting Labour's policies. No intention to stop a Labour government being formed. And I was outside the Labour Party till 2010 and rejoined. I was actually expelled after being constituency secretary, chair, which is, I think I was when we met. I was expelled in 2016 in the Great Purge when they tried to fiddle the membership so that they would get their candidate rather than Jeremy elected. And I was expelled without a hearing, without any right of appeal, and I've been expelled since that time. I've not been readmitted, although I've worked as close as I can with the Labour Party. Now, the AWL I would say the AWL has huge differences with many people who are in your call and speaking from the other organisations. There's huge political differences with us about anti-Semitism. We think it was wrong of people to trivialise the need for the Labour Party to fight against anti-Semitism. That's in a way a dead issue now. There's a far bigger issue now with the issue of Ukraine, where I am astounded and appalled by sections of the left who say that that this isn't a brutal Russian invasion. And I'm appalled, and I've got to say this, even though I am against all prescriptions, I think people should have the right to fight for their politics, and we should have the right to demolish their arguments openly and politically. And I'm against bans in the Labour Party, but I am appalled by a lot of the politics of some of the organisations being expelled, as I say, on Ukraine, which I've seen comments where people trivialise the brutal bombardment of Mariupol, saying, oh, it's a victory for anti-fascism to bomb that city to a pulp. Tens of thousands of people are probably dead as a result of that. This is no anti-fascist struggle by Putin. It's a brutal imperialist invasion. So I think the left needs to argue those points, and the AWL will attempt to argue those points. And we'll also continue to argue against the austerity policies that Starmer is doing. What's behind our expulsion, I think quite clearly, is part of the Starmerites and the Right Wings Party attempt to gain control over a Labour Party that they think will be politically inert and dead and devoid of argument and political debate. So I think it's quite key. I think we don't have the track record of some people on the left on anti-Semitism, on opposition to Russian imperialism. And I think that Starmer is worried about the influence we have in the party and wants to see if he can minimise us. So probably not Starmer, in all honesty. I don't think he's running the ship. I think it's people like Luke Akehurst and people of the former Progress group who want to re-establish a Blairite Labour Party.
That's a very honest answer. Thank Thank you, Pete. I just wondered, there's one other thing I just wanted to ask you about, was the second referendum. That was one of the things I've read about the AWL. You're very keen on a second referendum, which was Keir Starmer's supported thing, wasn't it? He supported that at the time. The anti-Semitism issue you mentioned, and also the one about Ukraine, these are all close to Keir Starmer. So I'm a bit surprised that he would prescribe your group, because a lot of the things that you say are quite similar to him, aren't they?
I think you're wrong there, Crispin. I don't think he was really for a second referendum. He read the situation very well, because, I mean, there was huge opposition in the Labour Party to Labour going along with Brexit. We're now seeing the consequences of Brexit with the Nationality and Borders Bill that's being brought in, with the the flag waving, which Starmer's doing, as well as everyone, as well as the Tories waving the Union flag all the time, which I think is it's just an anathema to any socialist. There's only one flag for us, and it's the red flag. But I think he was a very reluctant supporter of the second referendum. I mean, we had long arguments in a party conference to ensure we got a second referendum. He fought against that. He only then decided, when he saw the mood in the party in that conference, he decided he would say he was in favour of it. He's not fought against Brexit. When we thought, I mean, I will say I was on the national committee of the Another Europe is Possible, who had largely organised this. I would say, because a lot of people throw shit around against Another Europe, saying it's an AWL front. I was the one member on the national committee of 16 from the AWL. But we fought not only for a second referendum, but also to deal with the political arguments of nationalism, against the hatred of foreigners, against the xenophobia that underlined Brexit. That's what we thought was more important for Labour Party to do. Just calling a referendum without doing the political groundwork in arguing for why we should reject Brexit and we should fight against the nationalism that was going to rise on it, that was for us the primary focus.
And just to finish, where do you think the AWL will go now that it's, obviously you have to be careful about members of the AWL being identified as Labour. Is it just going to have to go underground, or could you be in the Labour Party? Is there any, what's the next step for you?
Well, I mean, I think I would disagree with some people. I think it's unfortunate. I can understand why many people are leaving the Labour Party at the moment, because, the optimism that was there in 2016 and 17, particularly after the 2017 election, has gone and people are despairing. But I think the Labour Party still needs to be fought for. I mean, in the past 6 years, I've been thrown out of the Labour Party, but it's still possible through trade unions, and it's still possible through friends in the Labour Party to change matters and to fight for it. In all honesty, I think, we're going to face a situation where when it comes to the next election, it will be either Labour or Tory. And we'll see what the Tory party is. So I think you will see people despairing. They will have to vote Labour. And I think we need to make sure that they vote Labour in order to transform the Labour Party, to throw the right-wingers out of the leadership positions, because I think there is huge opposition to what we've seen. John made mentions about COVID, the awful deaths toll that's on Johnson's hands. We're now seeing the crisis in poverty as we've never seen it before. We need to organise those people inside and outside of the party to ensure not only do we kick the Tories out, we revitalise the only party that is capable of forming a government against the Tory party, and that's Labour.
Thank you, Pete. So I haven't got much more time because I've got two more groups who've been prescribed. Thank you for coming on.
Just say one thing very briefly. We've got a demonstration organised by Ukraine, organised by the PCS, several of the unions in Ukraine next Saturday. I'd like to ask for everyone who opposes the Russian invasion of Ukraine and this Tory government cosseting of the oligarchs who they work hand in glove with and have done for a long time, despite their rhetoric, to join that demonstration next Saturday outside Parliament Square. That will be good, because I think we do need to be united against this appalling war and fighting against Putin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Pete. Now I'm going to speak to none other than Tina, who Tina, you're quite on the quiet. You're an LLA representative, aren't you? What's your position in there? Can you say that? You've already been expelled, haven't you?
I've been expelled a long time ago, and that's why I was able to organize in Labour against the witch hunt, which I think Pete Radcliffe thinks has been banned quite rightly, if I understood his comments correctly. Yes, I've been expelled a long time ago.
So Tina, why did they go to the next? Why did they ban LLA after they banned Labour against the witch hunt and they banned other groups? What was the point of that, do you think?
Well, we were surprised, to be honest. We weren't banned in the first batch of organizations. We've been, as outspoken as Labour against the witch hunt, against the anti-Semitism smear campaign, and and unfortunately, from what Pete Radcliffe just said, some people still don't understand actually what happened in the last 6-7 years. He calls anti-Semitism a dead issue just after we looked at what's been happening to Loki. Look at what's happening in society. They're still trying to implement the IRA misdefinition of anti-Semitism, the fake definition. They're banning BDS everywhere. This is a huge campaign that's been going on for a long time, which culminated with the campaign against Corbyn. They had a happy coincidence there, various lobbies getting together to kick Corbyn out. And still some organizations like the AWL and Momentum also don't get what's been happening and what is still happening. Free speech, speaking out for pro-Palestinian voices is being banned everywhere. And luckily the AWL is not important enough numerically or politically to have actually facilitated this, as some people put it in the comments, but they've certainly provided a left cover for the anti-Semitism smear campaign, and they should be ashamed of themselves. They've been really they've been calling for Jackie Walker to be, first they argued against her suspension, but that she should be removed from Momentum when they were still allowed to be in it. Of course, then John Landsman turns on them. That's what happens with a witch hunt. You're next. The same will happen to Momentum, no doubt, sooner or later. They're still, I've looked at their website earlier today, are they saying anything against the recent proscriptions? The zilch, as far as I can tell. Still hoping that by keeping her head down, you might get away with it. It's not going to happen. That's the main thing the last 6-7 years really should have taught us. Keeping your head down is not going to work. You have to fight a witch hunt, otherwise you're next, and then there's nobody left to fight your corner.
So am I taking it that you're not going to work closely with Pete on this?
Actually, I quite like Pete. I've met him, 20-30 years ago. He's one of the better people in the Alliance for Workers' Liberty. But not politically. I think we're miles apart. Especially, that demonstration next week. Should have asked him. Are you opposing NATO? These guys are saying nothing about NATO. Unless you understand the role NATO has played in the current situation in Ukraine, you understand nothing. If you just look at Putin's invasion, and that doesn't explain anything, and it doesn't solve the issue either. So just saying Putin is a nasty shit, which he is, doesn't do it. You also have to.
Hold on a minute. Let's get a little debate here, because Pete wants to come back in.
Yes, please.
I'll bring Pete back in. We should have a discussion here. Pete, what would you like to say? Can I just say this? I was hoping we'd get some kind of agreement and solidarity between everyone. It seems that's not the case, but maybe we can clear up some issues here if you two would like to talk about it.
Okay, thanks, Crispin. Thanks for letting me come back. We're on record, and I've written numerous times that we are against bans and prescriptions. We don't defend the right of anti-Semites to be in the Labour Party, and we think one of the problems has been is that some people have said that anti-Semites should be allowed to continue in the Labour Party. My accusation against Law and Tina and the others is not that they are anti-Semites, but they do not criticise anti-Semites and they do not recognise it as a problem. And also, it's a bizarre situation when I think. I don't know whether it was. I think it was LLA, not Law before it, but argued against Labour having an education programme against anti-Semitism. Now, I think
it's run by the Jewish Labour movement, yes.
I think we should have argue about what its nature is, talk about it, organise within CLPs to make sure that. But we should never argue against education, against any form of racism in the Labour Party. That is ridiculous. On the issue
about the Labour movement.
Okay, wait. I've been the chair here. Let Pete finish, and then you come back in, yeah?
As I say, we've always opposed prescriptions. We just simply have. It's just there all the time. Unless they're an organized fascist grouping, we deal with the problem of anti-Semitism by individual argument. On the issue about NATO, this is one of the worst things. Putin has been saying for well over a decade that, you know, he was fighting against NATO. It's, you know, NATO has expanded, yes, but it's expanded into countries where there has been no opposition to it. What holds NATO together, and I'm against NATO, I think NATO should be disbanded. And we've actually gone through and we've put motions to the Labour Party demanding the disbandment of NATO. But NATO is the phony excuse for Putin. And people who say this is a war about NATO expansion, it isn't. That's the excuse that Putin is giving. NATO actually, and you'll have seen Zelensky, who's hardly a radical left winger. You see Zelensky having a go at NATO because they're not giving the Ukrainian people the weapons they need to defend themselves. NATO is working with Putin to do a deal, just as they did a deal after the collapse of the Soviet Union to allow British capitalism and American capitalism to have a cozy relationship with these capitalists. So NATO is an irrelevancy. We're against NATO, but this is not a war. This is a war of the Ukrainian people, and they are being slaughtered by the tens of thousands. It's a people's war, if ever you've ever seen one. The actual state forces are minuscule in comparison with the popular militias that exist. And that's what we have. We should be giving solidarity with the Ukrainian people against this war and against their friends in the City of London and in the Tory party. Thanks, Crispin.
Tina, what would you like to say in response?
Well, I'd like to say that LLA and Labour Against the Witch Hunt, we've been arguing all the way through that, of course, education and debate is the answer how to deal with prejudice, how to deal with wrong ideas, etc. And that includes, of course, there were some few anti-Semites in the Labour Party, but it wasn't the big problem that both, unfortunately, the Corbyn leadership and the AWL, and of course now Starmer and the right and the Israel lobby have made it out to be. It was a fig leaf to attack the left. You know who was supposed to organize, or who is now organizing education on anti-Semitism? It's the Jewish labor movement, a pro-Zionist, pro-Israel organization. They're affiliated to various Zionist world congresses, etc. How are they going to educate you on anti-Semitism? Well, you can guess, right? They're behind the new definition, the redefinition of what anti-Semitism is. It's been changed in front of our eyes from criticism or prejudice against Jewish people to criticism of Israel. And unfortunately, the AW has been right in the middle of it. And not just, I have to defend them from that. They've been quite consistent with it. I remember being in a room with Sean McGovern 20 years ago where he called himself a Zionist, and that was 20 years ago. And if you have a leadership like that, I'm not surprised they've been taking the sides they have. On Ukraine and NATO. I mean, if you really think that NATO is now in cahoots with Russia and stuff, that's like some conspiracy theory going on there. Clearly, if you ignore the role that NATO expansion since 1991 has played in leading to the current situation, I think you're just closing your eyes. I mean, the AWL is well known for being a pro-imperialist organization. They think that troops in Afghanistan could play a progressive role. They were against withdrawing troops from various countries because it sort of protects trade unionists and women's organization, etc. So it's not, I'm not surprised by their position. What I'm surprised is there's some other organizations support groups like the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign. I think that's an awful campaign that totally ignores NATO and just lays the whole blame on Putin, which is just wrong. They're, as working class, as socialists, we should say neither Moscow nor bloody Washington, and we oppose both sides equally because we understand the working class has nothing to gain from this war at all. And to side with one side, as the AWL and the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign does, is the death for any independent working class organization.
So what should you?
Hold on a minute. Can I just come in, because I think this could go back and forth for quite a long time. What I find refreshing is this discussion at all. But that the Labour Party won't allow two groups to have that discussion within it is probably the biggest story. That you're not even, you two don't particularly get on. yet they're prescribing both of the groups. It's a bit of a ridiculous situation. I think you both agree that we need to discuss issues and debate, and you're both well up for that. In fact, you could both come on. You should both be on every week. Just have a big ding dong every week, because it is much more entertaining than hearing the same views all the time. Pete, it's great to hear you. Thank you for coming on. I know, as you said, most of the people on this call are not allied to your views, but it was great to hear your views and for you to speak. I really respect you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And be good. I mean, I'd welcome to debate Tina at length and others about Ukraine and imperialism and the nature of Russian imperialism and how we should oppose it. And I think it's very urgent because, as I say, this is a horrific war. I mean, you can't just say you're against war and that Moscow and Washington should not do anything and disappear. There's a problem. Moscow is doing something. Washington is not doing anything. So what we have to do is oppose Putin's war. And that means arming the Ukrainian people. You can't just get out of it by saying that the Ukrainian people should be left alone. But anyway, let's have a debate.
I'm not. We'll talk about that another time. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Tina. I'm just gonna, because we've missed out in this. We've missed out the Socialist Labour Network, and I wanted to speak to Norman about that. Hi, Norman. I'm sorry you missed the discussion there, but I think if there were 3 people in there, it might have been a bit difficult. Can you hear me? Let me try it. There you go. Unmute. You should be able to speak now.
It's saying no. It's saying it won't allow me.
You're on now. I can hear you.
You can hear me. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, my screen keeps saying the host. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Now, Norman, you keep getting prescribed.
I feel like.
Have you got any other groups that you could add to the mix?
Prescribed. We'll devise some more groups to Starmer to prescribe some more of them. I feel
why don't we just keep making up groups that take up a lot of time?
Labour Socialist Network, the network of socialist Labour people. We could go on forever getting prescribed. It'd be great. I feel like I've been prescribed 3 times in the last few years. First of all, I was the chair of South Thanet Labour Party, and I was suspended for allowing Graham Bash to speak about Jeremy Corbyn being suspended. And then so I joined 2 groups that were basically protesting against the terrible state of purging and prescriptions in the party, which were the Labour Against the Witch Hunt and Labour in Exile network. And then both those groups were prescribed. And then those 2 groups consolidated together to form Socialist Labour Network. And now it's been prescribed. So we've had a lot of prescribing going on in the last few years. It's appalling.
So you don't look particularly upset about this?
Well, it's too sunny to be upset. We're in sunny Thanet here, and it's very, very sunny. So it's very hard to be upset on a sunny day. No, what Jeremy Corbyn used to say at his public meetings, and I joined because of Jeremy Corbyn, like thousands of other people did, and became chair of my local party, to further the principles and policies that Jeremy Corbyn had been supporting. Jeremy Corbyn used to say, it's not me they're afraid of, it's you, when he was talking to a huge crowd, thousands of people. And all I can think of is that it's not anything but the left in the Labour Party that Starmer's afraid of. Starmer is terrified of having any left-wing people in the Labour Party whatsoever. So he even prescribes people like AWL, who, on all intents and purposes, would seem to be a party that Starmer should sort of have some sympathy with, but he's even prescribing them. So he's kicking out everybody that even raises a whimper of protest against what he's doing. So what is Starmer so afraid of? What is Starmer trying to do? That's the question. I can only think he wants the Labour Party to wither into some small right-wing group and then enter into pacts with Lib Dems, Green Party, I don't know, so anyone who's prepared to do a pact with him, because the last thing he wants is to go back to the days of Jeremy Corbyn. And the Socialist Labour Network basically exists to link up all the people who joined the Labour Party because of Corbyn and people who are sympathetic with those principles, and to protest against the purges and prescriptions that are going on. Not that our voice gets much hearing, because obviously Starmer has got the mainstream media on his side in squeezing out any voice at all for anyone on the left of the Labour Party. It's getting to be sort of illegal to be a member of a left-wing member of the Labour Party and do anything. You know, if you go to a Stop the War rally, the Stop the War is being accused of being, you know, some left-wing mad party. So anything you do, or if you protest against Israel and you go to an Elbit protest against the Israeli-owned weapons firm, you get arrested there. This all happening, so it's pretty terrifying, really. There's a terrible sort of McCarthyite atmosphere that swamps the whole of the party, and fighting back against it is what we've got to do. How we do that, I don't think anyone has really come up with the principle yet, because forming a new party, to my mind, is still a way off, because I don't think, the main reason is I don't think people have really learned the lessons of the Corbyn period. They haven't really. If we started a new party now, then who's to say that exactly the same things wouldn't happen to the new party and it would be crushed before it had even started? We've got to think smarter and think of a new way around these things. And Socialist Labour Network exists for debate and discussion. We're having a lot of public meetings coming up. We're having a public meeting on the Ukraine, funnily enough, and we're having a public meeting on the cost of living crisis, because these are the things that are very, very urgent topics. And anyone who wants to can get on the SLN Facebook page and find out what's going on. But also, what I would say also is that we're trying to enable the people who were the foot soldiers of the Corbyn movement to carry on debating and discussing and being active. And that's why we're linking up what people call shadow CLPs, local socialist groups around the country. We're trying to link those groups up to give them the chance to debate with other groups in other parts of the countries, as well as carrying on their own activism, because there's loads of activity going on. There's loads of activist groups going on. We had a protest in supporting the NHS yesterday here in Thanet, and loads of people turned out for it, and that's happening all over the country.